Help me to clean my room.
Shalom and welcome to Mishpachah. I'm Debbie Good. I have with me an assistant, Isaiah Good, a member of our family. And Mishpachah is the Hebrew word for family. We talk about things in this program that you can do with your family to celebrate the festivals or to celebrate the entire Word of God. Now, we've been talking about Purim for the last couple of weeks, but one thing I have not mentioned is that whenever we enter the season of Purim, the time of Purim, usually late February or early March, really should begin thinking about Passover, because you see, Purim is only a month away from Passover. And so you should start changing your calendar thinking to start thinking about the other festivals that are going to follow as well. Now, Purim is a festival that commemorates a time of when the diaspora, the Jews that were in Persia, were saved because a Jewish girl, Esther, was willing to lay her life on the line, approach her king, and beg for the lives of her people. And the end result is that the great enemy of the people, Haman, was... he actually suffered the same fate that he had in mind for his adversary, the good guy, Mordecai. Now, one of the things most people do for Purim, the great tradition, is to make hamantashen. These are little cookies or pastries that are triangular shaped that, some people say because Haman had a three-cornered hat. And I'm not so sure that is true, but usually it's a type of pastry or dough that has some type of filling. Now, we're going to make some hamantashen today, and we're going to start out with one of the more traditional recipes. Let's start with the filling first. One thing, and you can see that this is kind of a dark brown thing, but if we can get the camera to look right over here, because Isaiah's never done this before. If we can get the camera on Isaiah, I'm going to tell him what one of our special ingredients is for the hamantashen, okay? Isaiah, this is what we're going to use for the filling of our hamantashen. Okay, now it's a prune. Anytime I mention a prune, or even though I put these in my Rosh Hashanah zimas that I make a lot of times, the kids just go berserk. They just can't stand the idea. I mean, who really likes the idea of eating a prune? But they really are very, very sweet, and they can be tasty, and of course we all know they're good for you. But anyway, that's what we're going to start out with. We start with about 1 pound of prunes. Now, you can get the uncooked kind, cook them in water for a little while, and then remove the pits. I started with some that were already pitted, and I just kind of chopped them up in a food processor. See, it's kind of gummy and it just kind of sticks together, but it's been all mushed up together. But this is approximately 1 pound of prunes. We're going to add to that 1 cored and grated apple. And Isaiah, if you would hand that to me, and just pour that in on top of here. That's right. We're going to mix all this together. Of course, you can see this is going to be a very, very sweet mixture. And we just start stirring it up. And also, to help it bind a little bit, we're going to add a little bit of honey. So Isaiah, if you would bring the honey over and just pour it in. And just mix this up. This is one of the more traditional fillings that you could use for hamantashen. It's not the most popular in our family. One of the more popular ones, by the way, is a poppy seed. That's enough. That's good. I put more in there because I know what honey is like. It doesn't come out as easily as you want it to. And you could be stirring this around while I talk about some of the other fillings we're going to be using today, if you would. Just kind of stir that up real good. I also took some apricot preserves. I like the preserves because some of the fruit is still in them. And it's a little bit gelled. It's a little bit easier to work with. And then also, and this is at Joe's request, some cherry pie filling. He likes cherries quite a bit. And of course, this is simply open the can and put it on top of a deal. Now, while Isaiah is stirring that up, we're going to start mixing up the dough. This is by far the hardest part of the recipe to do. So let's get our ingredients ready. We're going to start with... First thing I'm going to do is we're going to add all of our dry ingredients, which would be a sugar. That's 3/4 of a cup. 3/4 a cup of sugar. Approximately 2 cups of flour. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And 1/2 teaspoon of salt, or about 1/4 teaspoon, just a little smidgen of salt. Okay, now those are our dry ingredients. I'm going to kind of mix those around with a fork. Okay, and again, that was 3/4 or 3/4 of a cup of sugar, 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I just like to have that all ground in there evenly. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is cut our margarine up just a little bit. We've got, it's roughly 5 1/3, because it's 1/3 cup of butter or margarine in this case. And so you can measure that out in stick form, but it's 1/3 cup. And cut that up into small chunks. And drop that into the flour, the dry ingredient mixture. There we go. Now I take a pastry cutter. You know, Isaiah looked at this and said, "What is this thing?" It shows you how often he's in my kitchen. I don't use one all the time, but I said, "It's a pastry cutter." He says, "Well, it looks kind of like a weapon." I might remember that someday. Reminds me of a story of a woman who was ironing one day, and her 11-year-old son walked in the room and said, "What's that?" That was when we were living through the great polyester period, I think. Sometimes kids don't know what gadgets in a home will do. Now, I'm using the pastry cutter to blend the flour and the margarine together. And it should be kind of crumbly. And what happens a lot of times is it kind of builds up on the pastry cutter. You need to kind of scoop that off. But we're going to make a pastry dough, similar to a pie dough, that actually can be rolled out. And so you want it to be about the consistency of pie dough. And see, that really helps. The pastry cutter really helps, first of all, to keep your hands from getting messy, but also to cut the flour into the margarine. And you just kind of roll it in and switch off. Now, we're going to add a couple of wet ingredients to this as well. We're going to add 1 egg, in which, of course, we've checked to make sure there's no blood spots. 1 egg. And I'll bet 2 or 3 cups of water. I'm just going to add a little bit. And by the way, it'll be easier to roll out if you use cold water. Okay, and again, we just kind of mix all of that in together. And this should form a soft dough ball. Okay, are you still stirring that prune stuff?
Yeah, it's nasty looking.
It's nasty looking. Well, you know, when you eat it, if I didn't tell y'all what it was, y'all wouldn't mind. It's only the knowing about it that is really the problem.
I'd look at this and mind.
Oh, no, and it's sitting in the cookie. I might have you taste one just to see. I'll be honest with you, I have not made the prune kind at home, but it is one of the more traditional recipes, so I felt like we should be traditional. And, of course, in our home, we do some things traditionally, and then we sort of invent some of our own traditions as well. But I think that's the way all families should be. Okay, our pastry is blending. It's sticking together and forming, but it still could use just a little bit more moisture, so I'm going to add a little bit more water. And remember, that's going to be a total of somewhere between 2 or 3 tablespoons. Okay, and we get that blended in real good, where it's kind of like a flaky pie crust. And don't worry if it's still a little crumbly, because what we're going to do, actually there's 2 ways of doing this. We're going to either roll it out in a sheet, or I can tell you one other method. What some people do is they simply take off a pinch of it and make a small ball. So let's see if I can, we'll get one of our baking sheets over here. At this point, you want to preheat your oven to about 350 degrees and spray or coat a cookie sheet. Okay, now there's one little method. You can take a little ball, so to speak, and form it together. And this one isn't forming too well. I think our butter might have been a little bit too... Okay. Mix that into a ball and then flatten it out to where it makes a circle. Yeah, one nice little circle. This is not the way most people do it. I know it's a little sticky on there. Actually, I probably need to do this on the cookie sheet itself. But flatten it out so it makes a little bit of a circle. Then I'm going to take some of the apricot, just a small spoonful, and put in there. And we will start to raise 3 sides of it and pinch them together. This one's still a little bit crumbly. Okay, but it should make like a little triangular form with a little pocket in the middle. Now that's one way of doing it. This is the easier way. I'm going to add still a little bit more moisture so that this won't fall apart as well. And what we're going to do is turn this out and roll it, just like you would a pie crust. So, how many of you can give me just a little bit of space? I think that's enough mixing.
Okay,
I think
good.
the prunes are done now, okay? And I promise I won't make all of them prune, but we turn this out. And actually, this should have formed like a soft, doughy ball. You might need to add a little bit more moisture. And Isaiah, if you'd put this over there, get it into a nice, soft, doughy ball, and then have plenty of flour ready. And we take, here, let me put that in the bowl. Take a rolling pin and just start to press it out. And we're going to have some extra flour, which I have right over here, just to kind of help roll it and to get the rolling pin nice and dry. Because it's flaky. And roll it out to the point where it's about 1/8 of an inch thick. Now this is quite flaky. Then you can take a glass or, a little, let me take this little glass, and you can cut out circles like this. And I would say once you get your circles cut out, then transfer that to the baking pan. Let's see if I can get it. It's a little bit crumbly. I think we still need a little bit more moisture. I can't get all of that up because you really should flour your counter or the board, your pastry board, before you start this. But that's one of the things you can do. And like I said, there's a variety of fillings you can use, such as the cherry or apricot preserves are very, very, big favorite. And then, of course, the prune with the apple. Now, Isaiah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you see if you can get these up very, very quickly, using the knife, just kind of scrape them up and put them on the pan, and then I'll come back to that as soon as I can get my hands dried off. We're going to talk about another Purim idea. I'm going to change places with you, and you work here, and just put them over on the pan as you get them done. Now, one of the things we have talked about in the last couple of programs also are some of the books that we've used, and I've mentioned this several times, our own book, The Prophecies in the Book of Esther. This is more of a study type book. It gives you a lot of the insights into a lot of the scripture of what was taking place during this story. Of course, this is by my husband, but it was a major project that we put together several years ago, and that might be something you're interested in. This particular hamantaschen recipe comes from the Jewish Kids Catalog. I've used this book several times. It's one that you can see is very well used. It's something that comes in handy for a lot of things. And the other book, I've used this before on the program. Real nice little book, and somebody's even asked me where they can find these. I don't know if they're still for sale, but this is the Kids Kosher Cookbook. This is written by Miriam Zaccone. And one of the things I like about this is that it will have several different types of recipes. And then at the end, of course, since it's for kids, written for kids, it'll have a list of the, not only the ingredients, but a list of the items you need to make the recipe. And then at the end of the recipe, it will tell you what blessing to use for it. Now, in the back of this particular book, it has just some little ideas of things you can use for various holidays. And one thing we're going to try today that comes out of this book is some Purim makeup. Purim is a very festive time of year where you sometimes wear costumes. Many kids wear masks. As a matter of fact, I saw a joke in the Jewish Kids Catalog book where this little kid all dressed up comes up to this girl and says, "What do you think about my Haman mask?" She says, "Oh, I didn't know you were wearing a mask." That's the type of humor you find in a Jewish Kids Catalog. But one of the things in this particular book, it has like some Play-Doh ideas, things like that. It also has a recipe for Purim makeup. And I have asked David, and I've mentioned, because David is older, he's secure with his manhood. I didn't think he would mind doing this. We're going to make up his face in Purim tradition. So we start with a tablespoon of shortening. Now I've used Crisco because it's all vegetable and because that is kosher. So about a tablespoon of shortening. And we add to that 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. So there's one. And one more. I just kind of level it off. And then take a fork and just mush it all together. Get all the powder and the grease. I guess this is where they really get the word grease paint. Okay, and blend all of that in together. And what we're going to do is add to this some food coloring. And so let's see what we can do. Let's just play around with this. I'm going to start off with a little bit of, I'll just start off with a drop of each. Here's some yellow, maybe 2 drops, 3. Some blue. We know that will make green. We're just going to do kind of a multicolored thing here. And let's see. David, I'll open the red if you will open the green for me. And I'm going to put in red. And like I said, we're using all different colors. And one of the reasons why is because they thought that this might produce a really icky brown or maybe a black color. I don't know. I've never gotten a good black out of food coloring before. But David would prefer black. And of course, you're starting out with a white product also. And I think we could use just a little bit more shortening in this and definitely more food coloring. I'm going to take more blue and just squirt a real nice, healthy dab of that. And maybe some red. Maybe we'll get a little bit of a purple. And of course you can use this to make nice little colorful cheeks for girls so that they can look like Esther. Here we go, David. Now this looks like a really nice yucky color. Now this will not be harmful to the skin. I mean, you're using all these natural products, but it does have grease in it, so you want to be careful. Or not grease, but it's got shortening. It's going to feel like grease. But just keep mixing and blending all of that in. Until you have a nice icky. Is that the color you want? David says, I think David's thinking, here, okay, just do whatever you're going to do to me and get me out of this chair. Okay, let's see. I've got a few Q-tips here, but I'm going to start out with my fingers. I'm just going to kind of smear this around. And let's see. That's almost about as black as we can get. Let's see. Let's start off with giving you a little bit of a mustache. Here, hold your face up, and let's see what happens. Is it uncomfortable? Okay, and actually we could put some bigger eyebrows on you. And now if he just had a pair of glasses and a big cigar, he could look like Groucho. Sometimes David can act like a Groucho, but I've got to tell you that for the most part, David's a very good boy. Let's go ahead and finish this off and give you like a little bit of a goatee here. Now, you guys out there that are watching this program, you remember as I'm doing this, that David's going to have to walk in front of the entire staff before he can watch his face. And let's go around the corners of this. Don't grin too much, now your dimples. You have to keep your face still. Okay, there we go. And I think that is just really nice. Now we can't leave you there. We gotta take this just a little bit further. Let me wipe off my hands though. Okay, you're being a very good sport about this, I must say. Now let's take another batch. And no, they're all grimacing out there. You know what I'm going to try to do is mix this up a little bit with a Q-tip. And let's just say maybe just some red. Squirt that all in there. Now, isn't he great? Isn't he wonderful? David can be such a good guy. And then I'm going to use my fingers some. I think that'll help to squish it up in there a little bit better. And, of course, that'll be the easiest way to paint it on also. But we've got to have a lot more food coloring. It takes several drops to achieve a color, especially if you're using just one color. Okay, and Isaiah, you have some pastries. Right? We'll put just a dab, just like a little spoonful of filling. Choose your take one, make one cherry. Okay.
Which one do you want? This is the only one that made it over
Oh,
here.
it's
really.
okay. Well, all right. Use that one, but put a cherry and a little bit of the syrup in there, and that'll be good. We'll let Dad eat that one. Okay, here we go. Nice red color. This, by the way, since we're dealing with flour and cornstarch, this is why I wore my apron today. And let's see if we can do something around your eyes. It just makes you look a little bit bizarre. He told me, he says, Mom, I don't mind doing this, just don't make me look like a clown. And let's just go right across here. Stuff is nice and thick. And can I get you to swivel around so I can do the other side a little bit? All right, here we go. This stuff is almost as much fun to make as it is to put on. Here we go. Ooh, I got that one. Okay. And you will want to kind of brush yourself off a little bit. And very, very nice. Looks different, doesn't he? Now I tell you what, let's just blot this right there. Yeah, there we go. And, we could even just have a little streak going down your nose right here. And let's go back to our black and maybe, we'll just take it down a little bit more of a hairline right down here. I'm really amazed that we got that color black. Okay, very good, very artistic. Now you're set for Purim. Don't know what you are, but you're set for Purim. Thank you, David, for being so cooperative. My hands still have a lot of cookie or food coloring on them. You did a good job of pinching that together, Isaiah. Very, very good. Now these, you might have to continue to form them. And what the problem is that it's too dry because the weather's a little bit dry out here. But let's go ahead and do the kind that you thought everybody would hate. Let's put a little bit of the prune mixture in one of them. And you need a little bit more moisture to hold the hamantashen together because the dough is just not really sticking. And we'll kind of fool with this one a little bit later, but it will make a nice cookie dough. If we had a little bit more water, which I'm afraid I used up, you can get that too. Just like with a pie crust dough, you can meld it together by using a little bit of water. But actually, one of these came out quite well. And remember that the hamantashen are formed in triangles. So you start out with a circle, you fold a flap over, you fold two other flaps over, and you pinch them at the three corners. As a matter of fact, I might even have a picture of one in here. Isaiah, if you can hold this up. Let's see. It's going to be, I think, on this page. If you can hold this picture up, maybe the camera, I'm getting food coloring on the foot, but maybe the camera can get right in here where you can see how you have a little round part of the dough. That's right. And how you're going to fold it at the dotted lines. Put a little bit of filling in on the dough, on the pastry dough, and then fold it up at the dotted lines, and then pinch the corners so that you make sort of a pocket, a little hidden pocket. And like I said, what we're dealing with is a lot of dry weather. There's not very much humidity where we live. It's very, very humid, and that affects a lot of the things we cook. So you can always add a little bit more water to make it moist. And I was going to say that this particular method says to take, a little small amount, roll out a ball, and then press it. But most methods I've seen are going to be to roll it out like a pie crust and then use a glass. In this case, I use a little small bowl to cut out a little round disc. So we should put this in the oven at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and put it in, but we won't be able to stay long enough to see how they come out, but you'll want them to turn a nice golden brown. Remember, it's a pastry, and so the filling, of course, would already be cooked, but the dough needs to become sort of like a golden brown, like a pie crust would. Anyway, that sure just about wraps it up for hamantashen and Purim. This is the third program we've done on Purim. That means since we started Mishpachah with the season of Passover, because Passover is actually the beginning of the religious year, now we've gone all the way through the year, through Purim. And Purim is our last festival before we begin preparations for Passover. That means that we've spent a year talking about various festivals. I think it was very profound that we started with the beginning of the religious year. And I want to thank all of you for joining me and my family as we've done some of these special projects that we've carried over, the past year. I want to thank also the staff who has worked so diligently in helping to prepare these programs because they've been just wonderful. They're great people to work with. I've enjoyed sharing my family with the audience out there and with everybody who's a viewer of these programs. It's always a pleasure to see my family participating in something like this with me. But I want everybody out there who watches this program to realize that not only can you do these things in your home with your own family, but you're also part of our family as we work with these things together. We're all one Mishpachah. Shalom.